In this video, I will cover everything you need to know to build your own terrarium ecosystem. So let's get started right away. I am using an 800 ml round glass jar for this build. This is a very common glassware and can be easily procured from the kitchen container section of any departmental store or from online sites like Amazon. I will also leave buying links for all the materials used for this build in the description. It is very important that the lid of the container is transparent so that overhead lighting can get through to the plants for photosynthesis. Most of these glass containers usually have seams where the two halves of the finished mold are joined. Care should be taken to avoid the seam line running in the front or the face of the terrarium. A glass container do not have drainage holes like a planter pot, and hence a drainage layer becomes necessary to hold the excess water. This layer is also sometimes called a false bottom. In the absence of this layer, the soil will end up retaining any excess water, which can lead to rotting of plant roots. There are quite a few material options for this layer. A very popular media for drainage layer is LECA, which stands for Lightweight Expanded Clay Aggregate. Regular gravel or pebbles will also work. A very good media is pumice, which is lightweight and porous. I will be using lava rocks for this construction. It is again lightweight and porous. The pores on these rocks will provide housing for beneficial bacteria, which will keep the ecosystem healthy. It also looks very natural and will blend in very well with the substrate and hardscape. I pour the lava rocks in the container and spread it out evenly with the help of a flat brush. I am keeping this layer a little less than 1.5 cm, which is about 1/10 the height of the jar. The jar measures 14 cm in height. I will cut out a piece of window screen mesh and use it to separate the drainage layer from the substrate above it. This will act as a barrier and prevent substrate from falling into the drainage layer and clogging it. You can get away without it, especially if you are using smaller stones and gravel, but it is good to have one as a safety net. Using my tweezers, I place the mesh on top of the drainage layer. I will now add a layer of activated carbon. You can use horticulture grade charcoal for this layer. It will absorb excess water, prevent odors, and buildup of bad bacteria. I add in a thin layer and spread it out with my brush. Time now to prepare the substrate. I am adding 2 parts of cocoa peat, about 1 part of sand, 1 part of pine bark, 1 part of dry sphagnum moss, half a cup of activated carbon, and half a cup of aqua soil. I mix all the ingredients thoroughly and the substrate is now ready to be added to the container. I start adding the substrate with my mini trowel. This will be the last layer of our build. I model the substrate with my brush and slope it towards the back of the container. This will create a forced perspective in our design and also lift up the elements at the back for a better view. Hardscape provides scale, texture, and a natural flavor to a terrarium. I will be using this piece of dragon stone as my hardscape for this build. Rocks and stones have an advantage over driftwood as they are not prone to mold. Wood and hardscape, on the other hand, very often lead to mold issues, which sometimes can be challenging to deal with. The rock I have is too big for this container, so I proceed to break it into small pieces. Dragon stone is not very hard and can be broken very easily with a hammer. However, make sure to always wear protective eye gear for such tasks. I have 2 pieces of rock now, and I think I will use both of them for my hardscape. But before that, I must wash the dragon stones thoroughly with water since they carry a lot of dust and debris. The hardscape design will be simple but effective. I am going for the classic V shape, which is very popular among aquascapers. I place the bigger piece of rock in the front at an angle and position the smaller one at the back at an opposite angle in a V formation. I move the rocks a bit until I am satisfied with the angle and position. I pour in more soil around the stones to lock them in place. I use a brush and model the substrate to my liking. I mist the terrarium thoroughly to moisten the soil in preparation for planting. I wipe off the water droplets from the glass with a microfiber cloth. I start planting with a mini bulbitis. It is an aquatic plant but will do very well in its emerged state inside a closed terrarium. It is also an epiphytic plant, so I need not plant it deep in the soil. I just place it in the background behind the rocks. You can use any species of fern for planting in the background, and it always works. Next, I start placing cushion moss around the scape. It will create a green cover and tie everything together in a natural way. You can use any species of moss that you have, but be aware that certain types of moss may not do very well in enclosed spaces. I cover the midground and foreground with moss and place one last patch in the front with some spacing around it. I press the moss patches firmly in place with my DIY tool, which is a skewer attached to a piece of cork. I fill up the empty space with small pieces of lava rocks to give an impression of a rugged pathway leading to the dragon stones. I brush them in place and throw in a few more small pieces on the moss. I mist the terrarium at this point again and wipe up the glass. It is important to keep the plants and moss hydrated as I build and film this project. This is my plant propagation box, and I will be taking a couple of cuttings for my build. It is almost impossible to get tiny plants in local nurseries, so I buy larger plants and propagate them in these boxes. When they grow, I use the newly growing small shoots from the plants for my projects. I take tiny cuttings of a friendship plant, a Fittonia green, and Bolbitis from the box. I am also taking this small cutting of Paeonia repens from my other propagation bin. I make a hole in the moss covered soil with a skewer and plant the tiny cuttings. These are easy to grow plants and will root in the soil in no time. I make more holes and plant in more cuttings randomly around the scape. Next, I take a cutting of Selaginella and place it in the middle of the V formation of the rocks. I place one more cutting at the bottom to highlight the focal point of our design. I plant the Paeonia cutting alongside it to add to the foliage. Finally, I plant tiny Bolbitis plants on both sides of the hardscape to complete the planting. I am using this tiny piece of twig to create some interest in the foreground. It will also lead the viewer's eyes to the focal point. I selectively place tiny pieces of lighter colored lava rocks with my tweezers on the moss to create some further detailing. These rocks will add to the overall texture of the design. I give the terrarium a final round of misting and wipe up the glass. Time now to add our cleaning crew. Springtails are beneficial insects and they will help with prevention of mold in the enclosure. They will also feed on dead and decaying matter, keeping the system clean and bioactive. I pick up a piece of charcoal with springtails on it from my culture and tap them into their new home. This concludes the build and I close the terrarium with the glass lid. Based on my experience, I can safely say that this terrarium has been set up for success. It needs to be placed under an artificial light source on a consistent photo period for best results. I will leave a link to my lighting video in the description. I hope you have found some value both from a technical and design perspective in this video. I'm sure you will find success if you follow these steps to build your own terrarium ecosystem. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and see you in the next one. Thank you.